it!
Hey, what's up, guys? Here to talk to you about UFC 276. But before we get into that, I want to give a big thank you and shout out to you, the viewers. We now have over 200 subscribers, and when I first started this, it was just to kill some time in between quarantine and COVID and all that going on. But now it's gained a lot following, a lot of momentum, and yeah, I didn't think I'd get a single view, but now I interact with people on a daily basis about fights and just my thoughts and opinions about anything with combat sports or sports in general, and it's been such a blessing. I'm so thankful for each and every one of you for liking, commenting, sharing, and viewing the videos, and I hope to keep up the good work, and maybe we'll bring some different content to the channel coming forward. But getting into the actual fights, we're in for another explosive, memorable night. We have 2 championship fights on the line, but honestly, this is going to be one of those cards that you tune in at the beginning for the early prelims, the prelims, you park it at the main card, and you sit there and enjoy them with your friends and family for the 4th of July weekend. Some familiar names and some up-and-comers are looking to light it up. We have Robbie Lawler on there with Sean O'Malley, Pedro Munoz, Jalen Turner, Donald Cerrone, a bunch of different fights that you're going to want to tune in for. Any one of these fights can steal the show, to be honest with you. But nonetheless, getting into the main event. So this one is going to be Israel Adesanya versus Cannanier for the middleweight title of the world. So as Adesanya continues his dominant reign over the middleweight division, we're finally eager to see him face somebody new that he hasn't fought before. And I believe Cannanier can deliver one of those amazing fights, and it's also going to offer us a new test for Israel Adesanya. Now, it should come as no surprise that I am an Israel Adesanya fan, and I'm very amazed and also very impressed with the skills and dominance he's been able to show over the middleweight division. But in the weeks leading up to his fight against Cannanier, it seems that Israel Adesanya has begun to be even more big-headed than usual. You know, it almost seems to the point that he's looking past Cannanier. And it seems that he's had his hands full or his mind full or preoccupied with Pierre and Sean Strickland. Alex has been sharing the clip of him KOing Israel Adesanya from back whenever they were in kickboxing promotions. And yeah, it was years ago, but you know, that has to be something that has obviously struck an chord with Izzy. And Sean Strickland at the press conference, he was lighting it up. You know, he had his good back and forth. And so all these middleweights seem like they're building up for their next fight. Meanwhile, Cannanier seems like he's laser focused, knowing that this is something that he's worked his entire career for and that he's going to have to invest all of his time and energy just on this one fight. Although I do believe a champion like Izzy can do what he wants, we all know that a lack of focus can humble even the greatest of stars. So getting into the actual fight itself, I believe that Israel Adesanya, although he's faced a multitude of different types of opponents with different styles, I don't think he's faced anyone quite as well balanced as Cannanier, although Cannanier doesn't present the same wrestling offense and wrestling threat that some of Israel Adesanya's previous opponents have. I do believe that he has just a different type of grit and determination, and also just a constant forward pressure and just vicious combinations whenever they do land. Cannanier also undoubtedly improves with every single fight that he's in. He's had experience with going 5-round fights with Kevin Gastelum, one of the folks who took Israel Adesanya to the absolute brink. And also, Cannanier has fought in multiple different weight classes in the UFC. So he started off at heavyweight, went down to light heavyweight, and now he's at middleweight. So he has a lot of different experience in these different weight classes, which I believe could give him an advantage of figuring out and mastering how his body moves and how it reacts to doing certain motions, which is a pretty underrated, useful asset to have anytime you're going against somebody who shifts their balance and their weight as well as Israel Adesanya does. So there's nothing mind-blowingly new that I have to say when it comes down to Israel Adesanya. I think going into this fight, it's business as usual. Get his timing and his pacing down, being able to control the distance and attacking from a multitude of angles, staying out into the open range so that way he can wear Cannanier down, and make him miss and get him biting on his feints. If he could do that in the first round, I think that Israel Adesanya is going to be able to have success moving forward throughout the fight. It would also be a big help for him to be able to redirect Cannanier's pressuring explosions. I mean, he will just lunge forward and attack full force, but that also leaves him open to a lot of counter strikes, which we've all seen Israel Adesanya have a lot of success with. And in Cannanier's perspective, like I said, he doesn't bring that same wrestling prowess as previous opponents for Adesanya, but it doesn't take much for him to land fight-changing bombs on his opponents, especially if he gets them sectioned off onto the cage or on the mat. Cannonier has devastating power, and he fully commits or leans into his punches and his combinations. But he has to be wary with that because a counter striker like Israel Adesanya, to him, that's almost like open season. One of the things I will say is that Cannonier's kicks have definitely improved the longer he's been in the middleweight division, and his timing of his explosions has also drastically improved, which has led to a lot of his success. So for Jared Cannonier, for him to be successful, he's going to have to try to corral or contain Israel Adesanya and not let him get out into open space, and he cannot allow himself to bite down on Izzy's feints. The big thing that would probably be useful to him that would also be very challenging is try to make the fight as gritty and nasty as possible. One of the best opponents that I've seen do that for Israel Adesanya, or to Israel Adesanya, was Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, that was, to date, the hardest fight that Israel Adesanya has had in the UFC, in my opinion. Israel Adesanya literally had to dig deep, grit out that win, and it was challenging. And Kelvin Gastelum went in there with a lot of disadvantages. Although he did have a good wrestling background, he was still a much shorter fighter and had to take damage almost every single time he was coming in range with Israel Adesanya. This is going to be something that Jared Cannonier is going to have to embrace, and the quicker he's able to embrace it, but also keep his wits about him when it comes to his defense, I think he'll be able to have a lot of success in being able to pressure Adesanya and at least giving himself a chance. Overall, I think that Izzy's going to have to face a lot of factors and a lot of mental focus and mental adversity, as well as having to physically overcome the obvious challenges that Jared Cannonier presents to him. I can imagine what it'd be like for Israel Adesanya to see Alex Pereira win before he goes out there to face Jared Cannonier, and then having to refocus himself on the task at hand. But this is truly going to show, his endurance and his ability and perseverance as a champion. So going forward from that, I think that Israel Adesanya isn't going to be able to get it done in the first round and is probably going to have to go to the third round and win via TKO. All right, so getting into the other championship fight of the night, which is going to be for the featherweight title, and it's going to be between the champion Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Blessed Holloway. And this is going to be the trilogy fight between these two. So going into this fight, I think that both of these guys have it in their mind that they need to go out there and finish their opponent just to close all doubt, close all controversy. I know that Alexander won the first two times that these guys met, but there was a lot of controversy, like I said, and it was very debatable whenever it came down to a decision. So keeping that in mind, both of these guys, I believe, are going to be looking for a finish, but not wanting to force it. Me, in my personal opinion, I thought Max Holloway won the second fight. I still think he won the first fight as well. But the judges have their own decisions, and we're left to deal with the results. So although this is a trilogy fight and both of these guys know what's at stake, I think that Max actually has a little bit more pressure than Alex does on him, just simply because even if Max does get the finish on Alex, it can always be debated that Alex deserves that rematch. So there is a slight chance that there could be a fourth time that these guys meet, just like Brandon Moreno and Davidson Figueiredo. You can run that back so many times, and people are still probably going to tune in. But looking back at what's happened since the last time that these two guys fought, I mean, Max Holloway went on an absolute tear whenever he fought Calvin Kattar and had one of the best performances that we've ever seen. And then he had one of the greatest fights we've seen in the featherweight division between Yair Rodriguez. And yeah, those guys drew out the absolute best from each other, and it was an exciting fight to watch from start to finish. But whenever he fought Yair Rodriguez, I think that for the most part, Max was in the driver's seat. But it was interesting to see him deal with such a dynamic striker. Meanwhile, Alexander Volkanovski was going against Brian Ortega after they got done with the Ultimate Fighter show. And yeah, Volkanovski was absolutely dominant the entire fight. He did get caught in some bad positions, but was able to persevere and endure and just out-tough Brian Ortega. And whenever he fought the Korean Zombie, I believe it was on a short notice fight, but the Korean Zombie went out there, tried his absolute best. But Alexander was just too much, man. Volkanovski went out there and just dominated the fight from start to finish. It was just hard to watch until, even the ref just had to just call it off, because I don't think we can televise stuff like that. But moving forward from that, both of these guys seem like they're in the best shape of their life. I know Max Holloway, he has given up on the hard sparring days and been able to focus more on keeping himself healthy and prepped for fight day. And Alexander, he stayed active. He stayed obviously more motivated, but he has seemingly continued to develop his game. In the first two times that these two guys fought, Alexander obviously brought down the takedown attack, and that I think helped him out tremendously. It gave Max another thing to think about. And moving into this fight, I believe that Max has worked on his takedown defense even more so, but he's also worked off being able to strike while he's defending takedowns. Not just removing himself from the situation. But Alexander does a great job of getting in and out of the pocket safely, knowing whenever he's close enough to land some damaging shots, but also exiting in a safe manner. So I believe this fight's going to be fought on multiple levels. I believe that Alex is going to be able to get Max down, but Max is going to have to be able to find his way back to the feet and know that he's going to have to keep Alexander at bay. But that dude just walks through everything. So it's going to be interesting to see how Max deals with that. But ultimately, what I see happening in this fight is Max being able to overwhelm Volkanovski and frustrate him so that he starts making mistakes. I know that that's not something we've seen from Alexander, but everybody has their breaking point, and if anybody can do it in this division, it's going to be Max Holloway. So therefore, I believe that Max Holloway is going to get the decisive finish, and he's going to win in the third round via TKO. So getting into some overview from some other fights that I'm excited to see, Robbie Lawler versus Bryan Barbarina. I mean, that one's going to be a great banger of a fight, it seems like. And Robbie Lawler coming over the highly anticipated win over Nick Diaz. And Bryan Barbarina, I mean, he's been trying to gain some consistency underneath him, but he has had experience facing some veterans in the UFC. So it's going to be interesting to see him to deal with the ruthless mentality and crazy momentum that Robbie Lawler brings to the table each and every time he gets into that octagon. And a quick fight I want to go over is Sean Strickland versus Alex Pereira. And man, dude, Sean Strickland has nailed the press conferences, the media, everything with social media too. I mean, he's been living up to the hype that goes behind him. And what's crazy about him is that he doesn't do anything extremely well or crazy impressive. He's just very consistent with what he does, and he is so resilient that it starts to mentally break his opponents. I saw him in his last fight just literally pick apart his opponent with the 1-2 combination and then throwing in something that's a little newer at the end, some little flair or whatever. Alex Pereira on the other side, man, he's just a vicious beast. You know, he has been infamously known for knocking out Israel Adesanya when they were kickboxing, like I said, but only 3 fights into the UFC and he finds himself on a main card of one of the biggest pay-per-view events of the year. So this guy is definitely going to want to cash in on the opportunity that he has. When it comes down to it, though, this one's a tough one to pick. It could be Sean Strickland time to shine and finally get himself into that contendership spot. Or it could be Alex Pereira, which obviously stories make fights, and he's already built his own story with Israel Adesanya. So if he could just get past Sean Strickland, it could be a big move for him. But when it comes down to it, I think that Sean Strickland is going to have the edge because he came off a 5-round fight. You know, he has more experience in the UFC. He seems more mentally focused and more determined. Although Alex Pereira does seem more stoic, I think that Sean Strickland is going to make the best of his opportunity and his spot on this pay-per-view card and be able to go out there and finish Alex Pereira in the first round. I feel like Alex is going to go in there and be a little too aggressive, and Sean Strickland's going to be able to be explosive, time out his shots, and finish the fight and project himself into the #1 contender spot, possibly. And of course, the fight that I definitely do want to watch that you're going to want to catch at the prelims is going to be Donald Cowboy Cerrone versus Jim Miller, 2 veterans of the game, which records are pretty much almost the same. And yeah, these guys are going to go out there. They both know they're at that point of their career where, you know, you're getting those last few fights, those last moments of glory, and hats off to both of them, man. You know, to be in the sport for this long, doing the things that they've done, it's going to be an absolute banger. But I can't help but want to see Cowboy just get a win, man. You know, he's been on an emotional roller coaster with both of his last 2 fights being canceled with Joe Lauzon. So, you know, I'm picking Cowboy to win in that one via TKO in second round, I guess, you know, if I just had to pick a round. But I'm looking to see him get it done. But definitely the fighter that you're going to want to watch in the prelims for me is going to be Ian Gary. I mean, he's going against Gabe Green. He's an up-and-comer in the welterweight division. And yeah, most folks are saying that this dude is the future, and we'll see. We'll see what he can deliver. But definitely you're going to want to check out his fight for sure. Also, super excited because next weekend on July 9th, I will be competing in Abilene, Texas at a pancration match. So it looks like we're in for another memorable lineup of fights, guys. So as always, guys, thank y'all for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you haven't yet, please follow the Combat Contact Twitter page. Like, comment, share, anything you want to do. And as always, stay safe, stay blessed. I'll catch you in the next video. Thank you.